This week in our Advertising Dynamics course, we're going to spend time talking about billboards. In fact, you're actually going to select billboard locations and map them out on a customized geographical information system map. That's going to allow me to understand your selection of billboards, why you selected a location, and how it will benefit your organization. In the next video, I'll give you some details about how you'll actually build the map. But for now, I want to talk about some principles of billboard usage. Billboards are part of a larger group of advertising called out-of-home ads. And these are ads that are specifically targeted to people who we know are out of their home because they're driving the roads where you see billboards. Billboards are a unique form of advertising because you have a very limited period of time to reach the consumer with your message, because the consumer is going 30, 40, 50, 70, or maybe more miles per hour. You have to keep it simple. If you look at the billboards that are shown here, these are pretty good examples of the principles we're talking about right now. Now, these types of boards do best when people already understand or know the brand. If you say something's on the right, well, it's good to give an indication of what that something is. The billboard on the top right for McDonald's is clear to most people, even though you're only seeing a small portion of their logo. They benefit, McDonald's benefits from you knowing their brand, so they can simplify their board design, which is one of the principles that are important to overall billboard usage. The billboard below. It's a little more crowded, but they've still been able to keep it pretty simple because you know their brand. When someone sees T-Mobile, it's pretty likely that people understand this is a mobile phone or cell phone company. Use high contrast colors and legible fonts. In both the cases here, you should see and understand how these billboards pop out of their surroundings. They're not subdued. They're very much intended to attract the attention of the audience that's driving by. Notice that the fonts are all sans serif fonts, which means they don't have serifs. We've talked briefly about this in the past, and in other design and marketing courses we'll talk about it more. Serif fonts are the ones with the little wings on the letters. When letters or fonts are more plain, when the type that you see is more plain, we'll call that sans serif, meaning they don't have those fancy wings or accessories on the ends of the letters or the fonts. Use high contrast colors and legible fonts, and then use striking visuals. In both cases, this is shown here, the visuals are fairly simple, but they pop out to the user. And a clear message. You don't have to talk about a lot of different things to get the message across in these billboards. They're not crowded with things you're trying to capture the attention of. You're not talking about how great the food is, for instance, in McDonald's. You're not talking about their hours of the operation. You're just saying, on the right or ahead, you'll find this thing you know. Again, this is more challenging for smaller or lesser known brands. Then optimize for location and audience. Your billboard company should be able to help you to better understand what billboard options are available for you to reach the audience that could be the best customers of yours. They'll have some limited information about the demographics of people who will see this board, so you can figure out if you're going to be able to reach the right people, and also the audience size. Clearly, some roads have more traffic than others. They're going to give you more eyeballs, more people actually viewing the sign. A sign could be worth more if it gets more traffic, or in some cases, maybe on a road where the traffic is slower and the demographic is more targeted to your audience, you may benefit. You may actually be willing to pay more for or find more value in a sign that has less traffic or less eyeballs if they're the right ones. Now let's take a look at this billboard here. Hopefully things pop out at you, but it's pretty confusing. Now as you look at this billboard, you can kind of piece together what it's about. It's about a bar and a restaurant that has 2 locations in this community. They have a URL, a website address they'd like you to visit. But imagine watching this board at 30, 40, 50 miles per hour or even faster. How much of this would you be able to take in? This would generally be considered a bad billboard design on a variety of levels. Here's a local billboard that takes advantage of some of the concepts such as simplicity, bold colors, graphics that pop out. Some people will look at this design and say, well, it still is a little crowded. And they may want to eliminate things like the URL. There's a lot of conversations going on in billboard design about whether URLs are helpful or not. If a brand has a good, strong position in search engines, the URLs may not be as valuable. People could just type in a brand. If you've embedded the brand in their mind and maybe not clogged it with trying to remember a URL, there may be better recall when they get out of their car and they're ready to make a choice, a decision about finding out more about the event, actually if the URL was not in place. But otherwise, this particular billboard, the key pieces, like the name of the event and the date of the event, pop out and can be taken in at high speeds. Again, as we move forward in this discussion, know that there are a lot of other principles that you can consider in billboard design and implementation. But these are the ones that we're looking at. Simple graphical format, high contrast colors, legible fonts, striking visuals, a clear message, and an optimized location for your audience. Other things I want you to think about are the orientation of the board. Where is it located and what's around it? It's not uncommon for billboards to be blocked or partially blocked by trees, utility poles, other billboards, street signs, and we'll look at some issues with that coming up shortly. You'll want to think about whether the billboard is lighted or not. Now there are some locations where a car's headlights will help illuminate the board for the person driving by, but usually that's not the case and you're not able to get the full message of the board that way. So the billboard companies offer lighted billboards. Digital boards on a screen that are backlit and lit like your computer screen help with that. But when we're talking about static billboards, we need to provide some kind of lighting, external lighting. Sometimes that lighting actually reduces the view of the billboard. It actually blocks some of your messaging. You're going to want to understand the height of the billboard. Generally, the higher the billboard, the better. That's not always the case. Some portions of the billboard can actually be blocked by the billboard infrastructure, such as work platforms that are used by the people who are actually putting up new billboard designs, or lighting below the billboard can sometimes block some of the billboard content in a high board. You're going to want to think about size. The board you see in front of you is often called a poster board. If it was longer, if the width aspect of the billboard was wider, we may call that a bulletin instead of a poster. You're going to want to think about whether the billboard's digital or static. A static billboard is less dynamic. Once you get your design in place, it's usually up there for a month, and it's not easy or inexpensive to change it. Where a digital billboard, that you're sharing the board with multiple advertisers, and your board just gets a segment of time before it's rotated out and replaced with someone else's message. A digital billboard allows you to be more dynamic in your messaging. If you have an overstock of a specific item, or a cancellation of an event because of weather, or a sellout that you want to announce, maybe encouraging people to buy or think about a future event instead. All of those types of messages can be changed dynamically. In our region, Meijer uses this, the grocery store chain, for talking about sales of specific products that are happening that week. If they had a static board that was up for a full month, it would be more difficult to convey the message about specific items being on sale. With a digital billboard, we could come up with a new design every week or possibly every day. In front of you, you see a specification document from a company called Outfront. Outfront's a national billboard company, but this document is specifically related to their Grand Rapids region. Remember, I told you that some boards are called posters and others that are wider are called bulletins. This document tells you and your designer that you're working with how much space you're going to have on the billboard. Specifically, 22 feet wide, 10 feet and 6 inches tall. A bulletin size billboard would be wider. It would be closer to 10 feet tall and maybe 30 or 40 feet wide. This particular document, specification document, letting you and your designer know what the specification of the artwork is that can be included on this board, is a digital board. There's similar documents for static boards as well. And again, static boards are the boards that are actually printed on some other material, maybe a vinyl or a paper, put up on the billboard and left there for 30 days or more. In this document, you'll notice that they talk about the mechanical artwork size. How big does the artwork have to be? In the second column, it talks about how they want the document graphic design to be in a JPEG, and that should be a familiar format to you. For most of the cameras you use in your phone, you actually export your photos in a JPEG format. Your graphic designer will better understand what that means and how to use it. So they want to know specifically when you send them digitally a design, a specific naming format. They ask for the client name first, the unit number, the contract number, so they can match your graphic with the specific contract for billboard placement. And then delivery instruction. Exactly where and how do you deliver the graphic? Once your graphic designer has created your billboard design and you've approved it, you'll notice toward the bottom right-hand corner of this document, there's a little link there that allows you to upload the file. So let's talk about some billboard locations. These are all real locations in our region. As you look at this billboard location, and you're looking at the purple area in this picture, do you see any issues with this billboard? Well, I certainly do. It's very low from the ground. Now you notice on the right, they talk about the specifics of this billboard. For instance, how many people over 18 will see this during a week? This billboard has the potential to be seen by 91,000 people. They give you the actual size of the billboard, the city or community, the zip code, then the actual latitude and longitude, the exact location of the billboard, and whether it's illuminated or not. But notice this billboard, because it's so low and it's at a cross street, if I'm taking the road that this billboard picture seems to be taken from, you see there's a vehicle, you see the hood down at the bottom of this image. If I'm going this direction and someone's coming from the street on the right, maybe at the stoplight, they'd just be sitting in front of that billboard. So some of the impressions that I'm told I'm going to get from this billboard are going to be impressions that are actually blocked by automobiles sitting in front of this board. Now here's another one of a design you had seen earlier, another low board. This one's, again, butted right up against a building. But if people are walking in front of it, if people are parked in front of it or driving in front of it, some of the audience will miss this particular board. Now here's another low one. This one is not on a building. It's in Grand Rapids and it's in a parking lot. And you can see how there's cars behind the billboard, but could there potentially be cars in front of it, either driving by or actually parked, blocking some of your message? In this case, the billboard company's telling us there'll probably be about 24,000 impressions of people 18 years or older. And an impression is the potential of someone seeing this board, seeing this design. Again, could it be blocked? Very often, yes. Now here's another example of a billboard location. And the interesting thing about this board location, and if you may not even see the board, if you look on the far left of the screen, you see this little rectangle. That's the board. And the perspective is it's facing the road that we're on right here. But as you look at that billboard, it may be a little tough to be able to take in the content of that billboard because it is not on the same side of the road as traffic. Just something to consider. Now here's a more urban environment, and we'd seen a couple earlier, not on an interstate, not on a divided highway, about 46,000 impressions. This is an example where in a few years, this billboard could start to be blocked by the tree. The good news now here for this board at this time is it's pretty open and pretty clear. One of the things you want to think about is where is your traffic? And your billboard companies can help you with all kinds of research, what they know about the traffic. Another thing that may be helpful for you to know is not just the total traffic over a week or over the month, but let's talk about the time of day. What you see in front of you are these things called the heat maps. And heat maps are just ways that we use color, the heat. There are warm colors and cool colors, and you probably intuitively know which are which, right? Usually blues and greens are cooler colors, and yellows and reds are warmer colors. In a heat map, what we do is we take an area and we put more intense colors on those specific areas where there is a higher density of something, in this case, traffic. So you notice the intensity of vehicle traffic at 8:15 in these areas, both the 8:15 and the 11:15. In fact, all these maps are the same, but you notice they're generally the same relative intensity, but clearly there's much more traffic in these areas at 11:15 as opposed to 8:15. It's just an example of a tool. So not only do you have to say, okay, I understand how many drive-bys, how many impressions I'll get over a week or month, but also what time of day they will happen. Here's an example of a location that I've actually liked for billboards. It's in the Ferrisburg area, and this isn't from, I didn't get the information from a specific billboard company. In this case, I just went out to Google Maps and did a street view. And the thing I like about this billboard is for a period of time, not only is the billboard on the side of you as you're driving by, but you're pointing right at the billboard. This often happens on road curves. So if you can find a billboard that is positioned at the beginning of a curve, that can often be very much to your advantage. And hopefully you can see how easy it is to have your eyes focused on it because you're not looking off to the side to see the billboard on the side of the road. The billboard's right in front of you, depending on the direction of the road at the specific time that you're looking at the billboard. This is one of my least favorite billboards in the region. This is in the Grand Rapids area, Wyoming to be specific. In fact, you can see the sign on the railroad bridge, "Welcome to Wyoming." And I want you to take a special look at the billboards to the right of the railroad bridge. And you may not see this very well, but what's happening is instead of the billboards being positioned and angled toward you coming in traffic, it's actually positioned away from you. Down in the lower left, if you look at the map, this green arrow shows the perspective that we're looking at this image from. We are essentially traveling, if you look at the image in front of you, from right to left. You are traveling essentially west. So if you're going west using that green arrow, if you look, there's a red line, and I'll put my cursor there so you can see it right here. You'll use the red line, shows the position of the billboard, the orientation of it, and this red line shows which way it's really facing. So instead of this billboard being facing toward the road, it's facing away from the road. So let's talk about some billboard designs that work beyond the principles, the simple principles we had chatted about earlier. And some of these designs actually break you out of the billboard. We had mentioned that billboards are rectangular in nature. They are. Almost every billboard starts out a rectangle. And if you can pull some of your design out of the natural rectangle of the billboard, oftentimes you can grab people's attention. Now you want to make sure that it's not just a distraction. You want it to be able to meet your needs, the design needs of being simple, having good graphics, being easy to read, singular in its message. If you can do all those things yet break out of the billboard structure of a rectangle, the benefit you get is you attract people's attention earlier, because there's billboards all over the place. And very often we get messaging just by our location and vicinity related to the billboard, not because the billboard's really attractive to us or interesting. But if we break out of the rectangle, it will attract the consumer's attention earlier, so that simple message has more time in the eyes and mind of the consumer. And you see what they've done here is they've just taken the rectangle and put it on a slant. You actually see, and it may look to you like, boy, looks a little sloppy. You actually see some of the structure of the billboard construction, and it attracts your attention. It's like, well, that's what's behind a billboard? That doesn't look right. It looks broken. Very often when people do this, the type of reaction consumers will get from this is, it's broken. And what do we do when we see something that's broken, or we see an accident, or we see a crisis? We put our attention on it. And if there's a broken billboard, very often we'll focus on that. Even though it's not technically broken, it looks like it. Another way we can move things off of the billboard, outside that rectangle, is by adding additional construction. And here's an example of a Chick-fil-A where their cows are three-dimensional cows. It's not just a painting of a cow. So it attracts attention earlier from the drivers. Here's a more extreme example of this where they use 3D versions of cans. Now, is this a simple design? No, and in fact, you may say this is an extremely cluttered design. But think about this cluttered design and how it could be beneficial. You can quickly get the primary message. Okay. You're attracted early because there's something odd about this billboard. It's not just a rectangle. There's 3 dimensions, and then it gets a little more interesting. Not only 3 dimensions of the product, but there's a plant growing, there's tomatoes, and what do we know? It's red gold tomatoes. That's the takeaway. Easy to read, easy to get the primary message, and very easy to attract attention. Here's another example of revealing the structure of the billboard. And what is this messaging saying? It's saying, well, we know that some of us may be not real happy with our skin, may not be happy with the condition of our skin. We recognize that, and this is a creative way to say it. What solves that? Okay, cleans pores and fights pimples. A really easy message to take in, even if you only have a limited amount of time. And you get the benefit of this odd, out of the rectangle design that attracts the user's attention sooner. Here's another example. At first glance, you may not even know what's going on here, but there's a couple out of the rectangle pieces. Okay. They're playing on the word pole, as in utility pole, related to their similarly worded brand of this particular automobile. And the couple of variables here are, they have this thing that looks like a utility pole that's crashed into the billboard. Again, if there's an accident, a crisis, we usually focus our attention on it, or at least temporarily if we don't sit and gawk at it the whole time we're driving by. So this should trigger people's view of the billboard sooner, their focus on the billboard, so they can take in the message about this vehicle. Notice down at the bottom, they have taken some additional liberties outside the rectangle, actually putting up like caution tape, almost like police tape, to attract attention. Here's another example. I love this one, absolutely love it, where it looks like the billboard trying to get the message, and it's very much related to the message. They didn't just look like the billboard was wrecked. They wanted to make it related to the message that if you do this thing called tailgating, you're likely to be in a mess, just like this billboard is. One of the things that will be important is if you get a very creative designer, make sure they don't get off of your primary message. Don't be creative just to attract the attention, but if you can attract the attention and stay consistent with either your brand, like the Chick-fil-A cows, or your messaging, like this, don't be getting too close, you're going to get in an accident. If you can do those things, then you should use any liberties you can with getting out of the rectangle of the billboard. Here's an example of a couple things. Using bright colors, bold colors. People don't have to read all this text. Okay. The message, no one is going to even try to read the text. One of the things billboard designers will say is limit your words, and I'm a big fan of that. Just like with my PowerPoint demonstrations. Some of the principles of PowerPoint presentations are similar to the things we have to be concerned with billboard designs, because we have a limited attention span. Okay, we usually have distance between the actual consumer and whatever we're trying to present, and we need to make it bold. You notice I don't use a lot of dense text on my slides. Okay, now, so even though they have dense text here, which you normally are not going to want, it's to show kind of a realism. Okay, but they're using these bold colors to attract your attention, and they're pairing that with a very simple message. Again, they get a benefit, McDonald's does, because of the strength of their brand, sometimes more difficult for a smaller brand. Another McDonald's ad, and we could have examples of other types of organizations and corporations where they have a strong brand that they don't have to explain it. You don't have to explain that you can get food at McDonald's or explain that you can get food a mile ahead. The message is simple. Coming up is one of these. The these happens to be McDonald's. Another great billboard design. Oftentimes McDonald's can take this even a step further by breaking the French fry design out of the rectangle. In other words, the French fries extend over the top of the traditional rectangle. One item you should consider related to this is that anytime you break out of the rectangle, it's going to cost you more implementation money. Okay? You kind of get what you pay for there. It's always going to be least expensive to just have your billboard printed and go with staying in the rectangle, but the impact's going to be higher if you can get out of the rectangle. Here's another example of large text, singular message, and little clutter. They're using white space. Even though the text is not huge, they've compensated for that by providing a lot of white space, a lot of ability to attract the attention. They have actually used some creative fonts, which generally would be considered more difficult to read, but because of the white space, the simplicity of this design, they have been able to get away with some things they wouldn't be able to get away with if the billboard was more filled with messaging and graphical distress. Keep in mind that you're going to have a lot of people in your organizations, whether you're working for them as a contractor or as an employee, who are going to say, why don't we add this? We should talk about this. We should talk about that. I'm sure there was discussions with this design about why don't we make the Meow Mix logo larger? Generally, on billboards, kind of like PowerPoint or other presentation slides, the larger the better. But you can use white space as your advantage, in part because people often aren't used to white space. So just like having something break out of the rectangular design, having more white space can be something that attracts attention. And there's going to be a tension there. Remember I said white space can attract attention, but sometimes adding white space adds tension because people who are maybe a little more naive about design and marketing and other issues surrounding this sort of thing will tell you, we have all this white space. Couldn't we use that to deliver a message by cramming more information in there? The answer is yes, you could cram more in there, but you're really not going to benefit from it because all the individual pieces are going to be diluted. So that's our foundational summary on billboard usage and design. Keep in mind, this is just a simple summary. There's a lot more to it, a lot of things to consider. But what I'm going to ask you to do is go to the next video where we're going to talk about actually selecting some real locations in our region for placing billboards and show you a way to communicate that to me in a GIS or Geographical Information Systems mapping program. You've had some experience with mapping programs in the past, putting customer data and customer locations on a map. We're going to take it the next step. I look forward to working with you on that part of the project. Please reach out to me and let me know if there's anything I can do to help you with this portion of the project. Have a great day.